You know how people say love blinds you? Well, I think I was in a coma, a deep, blissfully ignorant coma. Because if someone had told me years ago that I'd end up in this situation, fighting for my worth in my own home, I would have laughed in their face. But here I was. I still remember the exact moment everything shifted. It wasn't a grand explosion. It wasn't some dramatic argument where dishes were thrown and doors were slammed. Number A. It was a simple, casual statement, spoken with the kind of arrogance that seeps into someone after years of getting away with treating people like they're beneath them. You're just a housewife. You owe me. Those words, those 6 little words, delivered with a shrug like they meant nothing. Like I meant nothing. I should have expected it. The signs had been there for years, but I was too busy playing the role of the perfect wife to notice that my husband, Daniel, had stopped seeing me as his partner. Somewhere along the way, I had become his employee. No, worse, I had become his servant. I wasn't always this woman. I used to be ambitious, driven, and full of life. But when we got married, we made a deal, or so I thought. I would take care of the house, support him while he built his career, and in return, we'd build a life together, a partnership, a team. At first, it felt like love. He would say things like, "I don't want you to stress, babe. I'll handle the hard stuff. You just take care of the home." And I believed him. I thought I was lucky. But over time, those sweet words turned into expectations. The appreciation faded, the respect dwindled, and soon, my role as his wife became nothing more than a job he didn't even bother to acknowledge. I cooked, I cleaned, I handled the bills, I raised our kids. I managed every single detail of our lives while he walked around like a king in his own little empire, pretending that all of this just magically happened on its own. And the worst part? I let it happen. Until that night. It was a regular evening, nothing out of the ordinary. I had just finished cleaning up the kitchen after dinner. Our 2 kids were asleep, and Daniel was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone without a care in the world. I was exhausted. Physically, mentally, emotionally. I sat down beside him and sighed, rubbing my temples. "Long day?" he asked, not even looking up. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just a little tired. It feels like there's always something that needs to be done." He laughed, a short, dismissive chuckle. "Well, that's your job, isn't it?" I froze. My heart stopped. I turned to look at him, and for the first time in years, I really saw him. The man I had married, the man I had given everything to, was sitting there with zero recognition of my sacrifices, zero understanding of what I had done for him, for our family. I swallowed hard. "Excuse me?" That's when he said it. "You're just a housewife. You owe me." Owe him? Owe him? I laughed. I actually laughed. But it wasn't out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that escapes when you realize just how much of a fool you've been. Something inside me snapped. I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "And what exactly do I owe you, Daniel?" He shrugged. "I mean, I make the money. I pay for everything. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have a house to clean, food to cook, or kids to take care of. So yeah, you owe me." I stared at him. This man who wouldn't last a single day without me, thought that just because he brought home a paycheck, it meant he owned me. He had no idea. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to try and convince him of my worth. I was going to show him. Daniel had no idea that while he was busy underestimating me, I had been preparing for this moment. What he didn't know was that I had been saving money. For years, I had been quietly setting aside money from our household budget. At first, it was just a little emergency fund, but after years of being treated like nothing more than a maid, It became my escape plan. I had skills, I had a brain, and I was about to remind the world, and Daniel, exactly what I was capable of. For weeks, I played my role perfectly. I smiled, I cooked, I cleaned. I let him believe that his words hadn't affected me. But behind the scenes, I was building my empire. I started small. I picked up freelance work online, writing, virtual assisting, anything that could make me money without him noticing. Then I took things a step further. I reached out to old colleagues, people who remembered me before I became just a housewife. And guess what? They hadn't forgotten me. Reality hits. One day, about a month after that night, Daniel came home to something different. I wasn't in the kitchen cooking dinner. The house wasn't spotless. The laundry wasn't folded. Instead, I was sitting at the dining table, working on my laptop, earning my own money. He walked in, looking around, confused. "What's going on?" I smiled. "Oh, nothing. I just decided to stop doing things I owe you for." He frowned. "What does that mean?" I closed my laptop and stood up. "It means, Daniel, that I'm done being your unpaid employee. It means you're about to find out just how much I actually do around here." He scoffed. "Fine. You want to play that game? Let's see how long you last without me." I grinned. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not me who's about to struggle. It's you." And just like that, the real battle began. The first few days were amusing. I could see the arrogance in Daniel's eyes, as if he thought I'd come crawling back the moment the house started falling apart. But here's the thing. I didn't. I focused on my work, my plans, and my future. And for the first time in years, I started to feel like me again. Meanwhile, Daniel, he was unraveling. At first, he didn't take it seriously. He left his dirty dishes on the table, expecting them to be magically cleaned. He threw his laundry in the hamper, waiting for it to reappear, fresh and folded. He even had the audacity to look at me one evening and say, "Did you forget to go grocery shopping?" I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I don't know, Daniel. I figured since you make all the money and I owe you, you'd take care of it." That was the first time I saw panic in his eyes. By the end of the first week, the house was a disaster. His fancy work shirts were wrinkled and still in the hamper. He had run out of clean socks. The fridge was empty, and he had no clue how to cook anything beyond a frozen pizza. And still, he refused to admit he was struggling. He thought I would break first. He thought I needed him. He was so wrong. What Daniel didn't know was that I had already built something far bigger than he could imagine. The freelance work I had started, it exploded. Within weeks, I had multiple clients. I had financial freedom. And then, I did something that shook Daniel to his core. I hired a cleaning service. Yep, with my own money. One afternoon, Daniel came home to find two women scrubbing the house spotless while I sipped coffee at the table. His eyes widened. "Who are they?" I shrugged. "Oh, just the people I hired to take care of the house. Since, I'm just a housewife and don't contribute financially, I figured I should use my own income to pay for help." I could see it. The way his jaw clenched, the way his mind raced as he realized something terrifying. I didn't need him. I was making my own money. I was taking care of myself. And worst of all, I was happier without him. The begging begins. Daniel started to crack. The first real sign was when he offered to do the dishes. It was pathetic, really. He stood there awkwardly, scrubbing a plate like he had never washed a dish in his life. He kept glancing at me, waiting for me to praise him. I didn't. Then came the second sign. He started being nice. Compliments, apologies, even a date night suggestion. I just smiled and said, "Oh, I'm a little busy with work." I enjoyed watching him squirm, because for years I had been made to feel invisible. Now, he was the one being ignored. One night, about a month after my rebellion started, Daniel came home with a different expression. He looked defeated. He sat down across from me, sighed heavily, and ran a hand through his hair. "Okay," he muttered. "I get it." I raised an eyebrow. "Get what?" "That I was wrong." I tilted my head, waiting. He exhaled. I thought my job was harder, that you had it easy. But this," he gestured around the house, "this is exhausting. I had no idea how much you did, and I'm sorry." Silence. I let his words settle, watching him. Finally, I spoke. "Do you really mean that, or do you just miss having your socks folded?" His lips pressed together. "I mean it." I leaned forward. "Then prove it." And you know what? He did. From that day on, Daniel changed. He started helping without being asked. He stopped treating me like I owed him for simply existing. And most importantly, he started seeing me as his equal. It took losing everything for him to realize what he had. And me? I walked away with my dignity, my independence, and the satisfaction of knowing that I was never just a housewife. I was the queen of this house. And now, he knew it too.